In the church, we have the vocation of the religious life, of course, as well as marriage. But have you ever heard of the third vocation, as in the single life? Hi, I'm Teresa Tomeo, co-host of the Catholic View for Women, and welcome back to our program. We are actually going to be doing two segments on the third vocation, the single life, and I'm joined once again, of course, by my co-host, Astrid Bennett Gutierrez, who is a single woman, and also Janet Morena from Priest for Life. And Astrid is the head of Hispanics for Life and also Los Angeles Pregnancy Services.
Correct.
This is a really interesting topic, and actually this is based on the feedback we received from our pilot program, because many women wrote to us and said they felt like they were sort of out of the mix and really didn't matter, or didn't have a place for them, find a place for themselves within the church, because there aren't too many people talking about the single life.
Not at all.
Well, I know at Priest for Life, several of our employees specifically was some of that feedback, because they talked about, well, sometime, discern. One girl said vocation to be a nun, and she entered in a convent for a short period of time and realized that wasn't where she was meant to be, and then she thought maybe God's calling me to the married life. But she's in her late 40s now, and that hasn't happened. And she said, like, what does that mean? They have these feelings, these women, that is there something wrong with me? And people ask them, oh, let me fix you up with cousin so-and-so and this one, because they feel like, okay, you didn't become a nun, so you have to get married now. And she said, well, maybe that's not what God wants me to do. Maybe that's not what God's calling me to do. But they're struggling with those feelings. And when you think about it, Ashley, you must have a similar situation, that where do you fit in, and who's telling me about how do I discern this and how do I figure it out? So I know there's definitely a need for us to talk about this, but what's your experience, Astrid?
My experience has been that, well, naturally you feel called to marriage, and what seems to be a universal call for many people. But for me, it was just really wanting to belong to Christ, that strong feeling like I wanted to serve Christ, be close to God, and that naturally led me to want to discern religious vocation. But then for me, it was really seeing how much the world was in need of service from the laity in terms of the pro-life movement, knowing that 4,000 babies are dying every single day. I felt that somebody has to be there to try to rescue them, and perhaps total consecration as a single person is a vocation. For me, it was more just easing into it and realizing that this is what I really want to do with my life, is to help save babies and be close to God in the world, not necessarily in religious life or as a married person. And so far, I'm still open to marriage, but for me, I feel like God has really given me a mission, and that's what I've been doing these years. And it is difficult. You just struggle. The family, they ask you questions.
Right.
The media tells you you're deficient or you're lacking something because you don't have a spouse, you're missing out on something. And marriage is very beautiful, and part of what we do in pro-life is uphold marriage and all the vocations, but I think the single life has to be validated, and it is in the church.
I think getting back to your work that you do, and you said that you felt called to save babies.
Yes.
It's interesting because you're not married. You're open to marriage, obviously.
Yes.
But that, I think, is inherent in who we are in terms of being physical or spiritual mothers. And all called to be physical mothers. I wasn't able to have children, but I'm a spiritual mom in so many ways, especially with our viewers and my listeners. I actually get Mother's Day cards every year from my listeners because they feel like I'm a spiritual mom. So you're called to be that spiritual mom for the babies, speaking up for the babies for whom no one's speaking.
To be fruitful, to be a spiritual mom. I get to hold babies that God allowed me to take a part in saving that child's life, seeing the faces of the women who've chosen life, to feel a part of their lives every day for me, it has been a privilege. I feel so fulfilled. I'm tired at the end of the day. I feel emotionally spent.
Because you've given yourself for an incredible mission.
Indeed.
And really, nothing can be at times more stressful than trying to help a woman turn away from abortion and realize that, okay, I can do this, but then you've got to walk that walk with her the rest of the months. I mean, people just think when you talk a woman out of having an abortion, it's 1, 2, 3.
Congratulations, they're gone.
Well, that's what Planned Parenthood wants you to think, that we don't care about the woman.
Decision,
when they say yes, it's only the beginning. What we're telling a woman is that we are going to shoulder that burden with her. We're going to walk with her, that she's
week by
not
week,
alone.
month by month, throughout the
Absolutely.
pregnancy, and then after the baby's
born, we continue. I see the children when they're in kindergarten, when they're graduating school. I mean, I get to see their lives, and so we, work.
So you feel like, in a sense, that they're your children.
Sometimes we do even become their godparents, which is so amazing.
Well, you have a scripture verse here that we picked, Astrid, that I'd like you to share before we go into our clip, our very special interview.
Yes, it's from Corinthians. I would like you to be free from concern. An unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affairs, how he can please the Lord. But a married man is concerned about the affairs of this world, how he can please his wife, and his interests are divided. An unmarried woman or virgin is concerned about the Lord's affairs. Her aim is to be devoted to the Lord in both body and spirit. But a married woman is concerned about the affairs of this world, how she can please her husband. I am saying this for your own good, not to restrict you, but that you may live in a right way in undivided devotion to the Lord.
This is a perfect segue into our interview that we're going to share. I had the opportunity, along with Janet, to visit again with our dear sister, a single woman who has got such an amazing life and does so much good in and for the church, Joan Lewis, who's the Rome Bureau Chief for EWTN and who is based in Rome. And she talks about the fact that her life, well, it took a different turn than she expected, but once she accepted what the Lord had for her, she said it's been an absolutely incredible journey that just continues. Let's take a listen.
I have had many aunts and uncles, my mom and dad, brothers and sisters, dozens of cousins, and I just think I presumed, because that's what you did when I went to college. I just presumed that marriage, even though I'd planned for a career, I had worked in languages, maybe the Foreign Service, and I just presumed that marriage was on the horizon, and it took me a while to realize, to listen to God, that He had other plans for me. And one day, after a particularly traumatic experience, I can't remember the day, the place. I know I wasn't in church, but I just had this, Lord, I'm putting everything in your hands. And it was like this huge burden was taken off my shoulder. And then the rest of life just seemed to fall into place. Steps were taken. My steps, I guess, were guided. If I'm looking back on it now to tell you, I would say my steps were guided. And before, I hadn't let that happen. I thought, obviously, I knew it all and what my life should be. And when I let the Lord take over, all the steps that have brought me to where I am today, my years at the Vatican and then leading up to this time with EWTN. If they can find if they can allow themselves to let someone like the Lord guide their life, and that doesn't mean you sit back and everything's going to fall into your lap. You're still going to have to work and make things happen, but you can be immensely happy not being married. I didn't know that for a while. I saw the happiness in my parents' marriage, in all of my aunts and uncles and cousins. And right now, I don't have that, never did, but I do have 9 gorgeous nieces and nephews, 17, one just born, I think it's a month or two ago, 17 great nieces and nephews. And my life is filled by those relationships, but also by the relationships I have here in Rome, friends, and elsewhere. I mean, all over America. I could get a car, start out in New York, and probably drive for 6 months, zigzagging across America to be with friends that I've made through my work with the church. The same thing in Rome, my links to my parish here. I have a very full, active life in my parish. And I have wonderful ties, and have had for over 20 years, with the North American College, our seminary in Rome. And the young seminarians that come in, they're like my guys. Mm-hmm. And it's wonderful. And I personally have great fulfillment. I have had for decades. Don't have my own little ones or big ones that are going to go on and carry my name or a married name, but huge satisfaction. And I think you have to allow yourself to that. I didn't close myself off by saying, this is what I want, and if I don't get it, I never was angry or had a problem, or just, okay, this is what life dealt me, and this is a hand, and it's a beautiful hand, and it's made me very, very happy. But you do have to be open to it. I've had people come up to me and ask me, do you ever have any problems in life? You're always smiling. I've had strangers smile back at me. I guess I smile a lot when I'm walking down the street. I am a very happy person. I have so many reasons to be happy. Most of those reasons have names. They're my family, they're my friends, they're my faith. And if I was going to write a book about my life, I don't suppose that'd be an original title, but it would be Faith, Family, and Friends. I love working hard. I've always worked hard. That's just something my mom and dad passed on to me, I think. But it's never ever been a burden. I loved school. I love, this is going to sound so dumb, I love housework. I love my home. I love opening my home up to people. It can be house guests, I have many, many dinner parties. And I'm surrounded by wonderful people. And just the joy of preparing a meal, setting the table, putting the flowers out, knowing that I'm going to bring together a certain group of people, and it's going to be a wonderful, exciting, stimulating evening, and an evening of learning and laughter and so many things. So I wake up in the morning excited about, the very minute I put my feet on the floor and start going to the kitchen to make breakfast. And the most beautiful thing for me that he ever wrote for me as a woman was his letter to women. In 1995, I was on the Vatican delegation to go to Beijing for the Conference on Women in September of '95. And just before that, he wrote this beautiful letter. And he thanked literally every woman alive, because he thanked teachers, he thanked mothers, he thanked nurses, he thanked women who bake bread. I mean, whatever your job was in life as a woman, there was no one that he forgot. And he talked about the nurturing and educative nature of women. He called it women's genius. And of course, naturally, I think he's totally right on that. He really hit a bullseye with that phrase. But that's what he felt. And this is a man who grew up within families. Right. He saw mothers nurture and educate and maybe just be a housewife. And that's not a good word to say just, because a housewife can go to bed just, dropping dead with fatigue at night because of what they do during the day, with kids and with a family.
Our very own Joan Lewis from EWTN, and what a beautiful interview. I loved her comments, but she could start on one end of the country in New York and go all the way over to California and zigzag and have all these different friends and what a full life. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about what Joan had to say, and then we'll also share with you some ideas if you're single and you're wondering what the Lord has in store. Our spiritual director, Father Frank Pavone, has given us some great tips on discerning your vocation in life, if it is the first vocation of religious life, marriage, or maybe even the single life. We'll be right back. Stay tuned as we continue with another edition and segment of the Catholic View for Women here on EWTN. Welcome back to the Catholic View for Women. Teresa Tomeo along with Astrid Bena Gutierrez and Janet Miranda, my co-host, of course, on the Catholic View for Women here on EWTN. Really hope you enjoyed that brief interview with Joan Lewis. Joan is, of course, a guest on my radio program, Catholic Connection, every Wednesday morning, right after the audience with the Holy Father. She joins us live from Rome. And Janet and I have had the privilege more than once of being in her beautiful apartment.
Oh, it is amazing. First of all, the view from, I know she
talked about the Catholic view, because it really is a Catholic view.
It is a Catholic view.
St. Peter's right there from her dining room.
But she talks about her entertaining and her dining room table. Next time, Ashley, we'll have to bring you over. You have the pleasure of it. But she always sits with her back to the window because she lets all her guests around her table stare at the dome of St. Peter's, which is right out her window. And her food it's like a gourmet meal.
She's eating in a high-end restaurant. Right.
And she fusses over everyone with the beautiful linens, and then the china is out, and then all the artifacts around her apartment. I mean, it's like a tour. It's amazing. All the people she's met, the things she's
Pictures
done.
of her and the Holy Father.
Of the different Holy Fathers.
Right,
plural.
I should say plural, right,
plural.
Exactly.
It's just amazing. And she's such a gracious host. You just email her you're coming to Rome, and so many people have stayed at her home, dinner parties from cardinals to bishops. And seminarians, she talked about her love for the knack, and how she worked. That's North American College,
right?
How she kind of like is a little den mother sometimes for the guys, and they go up there at Thanksgiving time, and it's just her life. It really is full. And I bet you, I know Joan probably wouldn't mind us saying this because she doesn't care about her age, but Joan is 72 years old. And you would never guess it by looking at that and her energy about, like she said, she gets up in the morning, praises the Lord, and hits the ground running, and her smile. I mean, we even went shopping with her near her home. All the shopkeepers know her. Hi, Joan. And, it's just amazing. the joy.
But I think that the point that is really interesting that she made, and I know, even though I'm married, I felt the same thing when I accepted that God had a different path for my life, leaving the secular media, going into Catholic media.
Right.
And I just said, okay, Lord, if this is it, if you want me to leave, I'm okay with it, because I had struggled with it for a long time. And no, I'm supposed to be on television, being this Christian in the secular media. I'm supposed to do this, that, or the other thing. But once I said, okay, maybe that's not how you want to use my gifts, I'm going to accept that, because doors kept closing for me in that arena. And then a peace came over me, and then he slowly moved me into a different direction. And did you notice how she mentioned that?
Right.
That she didn't block herself off, and I think that's what happens to a lot of us. I did that for a while, or no, I have to be in the secular media, I have to be on the air. But once I said, okay, God, maybe there's another plan here for me to use my talents, things started to change, and the peace made all the difference in the world.
She mentions that, how she let God take over her life, and it made all the difference.
Right.
Watching her was so inspiring for me, because it shows this incredible magnanimity that I think we all need to have, but especially single people, because the tendency is to draw inward to what we don't have.
As opposed to,
and Lord, why didn't you get, why don't I have this? And then she radiates this incredible generosity.
Right.
She radiates Christ, first of all, because she has a strong
But I think that's because she opened herself up.
Exactly. That was a starting point.
You know, but it's not that she didn't have a struggle about it. You know, she did indicate that. You know, there was that period, which probably a lot of women are identifying with, like, okay, I'm in that phase right now, and that's why you need to turn to the Lord in discernment and say, you know, Lord, what are you asking me to do? Because Joan said she finally asked the question. Like she said, you know, I was going through life, and then I finally said, okay, God, sometimes we need to ask him, which we don't do. You know, we just, like, in our own thoughts and feel, sometimes we're throwing ourselves little pity parties too about things aren't working out the way we want them to. And when she finally asked, God said, hello, Joan, it's okay. And that's when she got that peace. So sometimes we have to be kind of listening, which I don't think we do. And we have too much noise around us, as you say in your book, noise. You know, the media, the TVs, the cell phones, the iPods. Sometimes we have to be still and listen to the Lord. You know?
And trust.
And trust.
You have a quote here from the Catechism, Janet, that's really good.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, we want to try to bring out documents, and everyone hears about the new Catechism. I want to know how many of our viewers have actually cracked the binding in theirs at home.
Yeah.
So this is from the actual quote is from 1658 of the Catechism, which says, "We must also remember the great number of single persons who, because of the particular circumstances in which they have to live, often not of their choosing, are especially close to Jesus' heart, and therefore deserve the special affection and active solitude of the Church, especially of pastors. Many remain without a human family, often due to conditions of poverty. Some live their situation in the spirit of the Beatitudes, serving God and neighbor in exemplary fashion. The doors of homes, the domestic churches, and of the great family which is the Church must be open to all of them. No one is without a family in this world. The Church is a home and family for everyone, especially those who labor and are heavy laden."
That is so beautiful.
So I mean, I think that's a perfect inspiration there for what we're talking about.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this program that we're doing in the next segment, we'll do it again on vocations, a single life. We're going to be actually doing, you know, 2 parts. But I think it's actually beautiful because it gives people a chance to kind of reflect on this whole situation and look at things a little bit differently. Okay, what is God trying to tell me? And so what we're trying to do in these programs is help you through that process, the discernment process. And we have a wonderful spiritual director, Father Frank Pavone, and we sought his advice on this as a priest and a spiritual director himself. And he says that when God calls someone to a particular mission, he gives a desire, the ability, and the opportunity. One's desires, so what you're feeling in your heart, if God put a desire on your heart for something, may not necessarily be in conflict with God's will. In fact, it is precisely through those desires that God may be revealing his will for your life. So what does that mean? Well, in my case, for example, I wanted to be on the air.
Right.
Now, God gave me that desire when I was in the third grade.
With that microphone.
And Sister Lucinda handed me the microphone and put me on stage. That was it. I was done. And so when I started to struggle in my career, I was thinking, well, wait a minute. What's going on here? Is this what I'm supposed to do? But God put the desire and gave me the talent. I just had to kind of
redirect it.
Redirect it. But Father goes on to point out, John 1, the following account clarifies discernment. These 2 disciples wanted to have a conversation with Jesus on the road to figure out if they should be with him. But Jesus simply tells them, come and see. Sometimes we have all the information we're going to get through thinking and talking and are at the point where we simply have to keep walking and get more clarity through the experience of trying out a particular way of life. I love it. In other words, walking forward in faith.
Well, taking the next best step.
Right,
you know?
right. And so he refers to this journey that the disciples are on. The next day, John was there again with 2 of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." When the 2 disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" They said, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" "Come," he replied, "and you will see." So they went and saw where he was staying and spent that day with him. It was about the 10th hour. So that whole invitation to come and see. He's not going to give us the big picture all at once.
No,
he's going to say, okay,
yes.
just journey, walk with me a little bit now.
And sometimes that walk with me might be spending time in adoration. You know, Eucharistic adoration, quiet with the Lord. You know, because there they had Jesus on earth with them and they were walking with him. So people might be saying, well, you know, how do I hear Jesus? Well, we have so many adoration chapels around the country. Exactly. And that's what I think this is saying to in this day and age, to come and see and come and pray before the Blessed Sacrament. Yes. And then do like this is saying, take that next step that you think Jesus is calling in your heart. And then that peace will come.
And isn't it true that probably during discernment is when we have the most intense prayer moments of our lives, when God really says, "I've chosen you for this particular vocation
and will you
or
say
mission."
Yes to it?
Exactly. Right. So going through discernment is a blessing in itself, and in the end, we have to realize that no matter what we choose, we are called to be spouses of Christ.
Right.
He is the spouse of our soul. So in everything, to look for Him first, no matter where you end up, or if you're married or single, to always remember that your happiness is in Christ. And you know, being in adoration, it's one of the most, if the most, not the most sublime thing that you could be doing is being in prayer, receiving communion every day. What a blessing. So single people that have time should go and look for Christ, spend more time with Him, and He is going to fill you and make you happy.
Come and see, as
Indeed.
it tells us in the
Amen.
Gospel. Now you have some more discernment tips
Yes.
that we want to pass on.
So 2 other points to keep in mind from Father Pavone. He says, God will deal with us in a similar pattern as He has done in the past. In other words, when trying to make a difficult decision, think about how God has made clear the right decision in the past. And second, if you feel called to marriage, that is a normal aspect of our human nature. The mere desire for it doesn't mean that it is your call. But if you feel you may be called to religious life, presume that you are, because it requires a special grace to feel the attraction to that.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
I'd like us to close. We only have about 4 minutes left with another one of my favorite documents. I mentioned in previous shows that I really loved JP2's Dignity of Women, or Mulieris Dignitatem, on the dignity and vocation of women. But Joan actually quoted in her interview, she talked about this letter, the papal letter to women, which was from JP2, the same time of the 1995 Beijing Women's Conference, which was very controversial. And so here was John Paul II presenting a much different view of the world for women, from the Catholic view, as we like to say. So Janet, why don't you start?
Okay, it starts with, thank you, women who work. You are present and active in every area of life, social, economic, cultural, artistic, and political. In this way, you make an indispensable contribution to the growth of a culture which unites reason and feeling to a model of life ever open to the sense of mystery, to the establishment of economic and political structures even more worthy of humanity.
Thank you, consecrated women. Following the example of the greatest of women, the Mother of Jesus Christ, the incarnate Word, you open yourselves with obedience and fidelity to the gift of God's love. You help the Church and all mankind to experience a spousal relationship to God, one which magnificently expresses the fellowship which God wishes to establish with His creatures.
I love this. Thank you, every woman, for the simple fact of being a woman. Through the insight which is so much a part of your womanhood, you enrich the world's understanding and help to make human relations more honest and authentic. We only have about a minute and a half left, so we're going to turn it over to our teacher for the homework assignment, which does include the papal letter to women.
But I want to remind everyone of our Madonna of the Kitchen, which is our symbol for this show to kind of help us keep a more spiritual mind in our kitchens. And of course, the homework assignment is to read in its entirety John Paul II's papal letter to women, which will be on our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com, which also will have discussion questions for the topic of this show, and we really encourage the women to read the document and get together with your friends and talk over these issues, because that's sometimes how you have more clarity, is to talk among friends.
You know, last year when we had the pilot program, we actually had a lot of different groups that were having these Catholic View for Women gathering parties. They would have a launch party, and they would meet, you know, once a week and really discuss the topics. I actually went to one in suburban Detroit, in the Archdiocese of Detroit. So this would be a great thing really to talk about with women, the papal letter to women, and to get an understanding of really, again, as we're stressing on this program, the true Catholic view for women is not one of oppression, but one of true freedom and liberation. Thanks so much for joining us on this edition of The Catholic View, taking a more in-depth look at the third vocation, the single life, and we'll be back with another program on this very topic. I'm Teresa Tomeo. Tune in again, and don't forget to visit our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com. And we'll see you next time. Myself, Teresa Tomeo, Astra Bena Gutierrez, Janet Marana on The Catholic View, right here on EWTN. We'll see you next time. Thanks and God bless.